jury indicated that that defense and the version of offense that, as Michele gave them, were credible, at least to the extent that the jury was not in a position to believe beyond a reasonable doubt that she voluntarily used these substances. I understand, and the courts made it clear, that the ag vehicular homicide and the ag vehicular assaults, as they're charged, are essentially strict liability, and there's not a examination into the voluntary nature of the consumption of drugs with regard to those. We respect the court's ruling, but based on that, we would ask the court to look at the facts and look at the way the trier of fact made their decision. There may be some individuals that don't believe Michele's version of offense. That doesn't matter. The trier of fact in this case was convinced enough, and we can see by their verdict, that they weren't convinced that she, beyond a reasonable doubt, that she had used these drugs voluntarily. The court looks at the civil action that's been filed against my client by the Oliphant family. They believed the version of events that my client put forth enough to list Kevin Bowman as a defendant in that civil action. The law is flawed. That's an issue with the legislature. The legislature, in making this a strict liability, essentially offense, in its interpretation with appellate courts have seen and ruled on, is making it to an extent where anybody that goes to a restaurant, gets a water, turns their back, goes to the restroom, and someone puts drugs in that water, and that individual comes back and consumes it, goes on the roadway without being aware of what they're doing, causes an accident, is criminally liable. And that's wrong. It's not fair. It's not just. I recognize and I respect the court's ruling that that is how the court has interpreted the law and how appellate courts have interpreted the law to this point. But I come to the court and I indicate it's not fair. Oftentimes the court will look at what is the most serious form of the offense and aggravating factors. And I proffer to the court, based on the trier of facts, findings, and the verdict that they rendered, that this is not the most serious form of the offense. In fact, it's the least serious form of the offense because she didn't take these drugs voluntarily or intentionally. As such, we think it's appropriate the court give a minimum sentence, run charges concurrently. We know that the law requires there be a mandatory prison sentence imposed. As such, we're asking the court if it would consider setting an appellate bond while this matter is pending. Michelle's going to want to address the court. Before she does, in closing, we're asking that the court's sentence be one that shows mercy and grace and that is consistent with the viewpoint of the trier of fact in this case.
Thank you, Mr. Hawkins. I'd ask that the defendant be unhandcuffed during the sentencing. You're
Thank you.
in cuffs. Thank you, Deb. Rick, would you, is there some Kleenex put out there for the young lady? This one? All right. When she was cut, she couldn't wipe her face. Schuster, you have the opportunity now to speak on your own behalf. Take your time. This is your opportunity.
I thank you for giving me the opportunity to express my deepest and sincere sympathy to everyone hurt by the events on April 22nd, 2015. I can't imagine the grief and the pain Amber's family is going through, what Joe and Tiffany, Billy, and Blake are dealing with physically and mentally. It must be excruciatingly painful, and it has haunted me for over a year now. If I could turn back time or trade places with Amber, I would in a heartbeat. I relived that day over and over, and I'm sorry to the victims, I'm sorry to the families, and I'm sorry to my family, and I'm sorry that day didn't turn out differently. I know anything I say doesn't bring Amber back, and it won't change the pain and suffering Joe, Tiffany, and Billy have gone through. But I know it's only right to say how I feel, and I know when I finally find peace inside myself to accept the events of that day, I want to go to God with a clear conscience. And I truly hate that that day had ever happened.
Very well. Is there anything else the defendant wishes to present?
No, Your Honor. As we indicated, that there's family present. They don't want to address the court this time, but just so the court knows they're here in support.
Ms. Reynolds handed me something that was emailed to her, I think over the lunch hour, about 12:20. It's signed by Michael Ehlers, A-H-L-E-R-S. Is he present? He represents himself to be a life partner and soulmate of the defendant. Is this something you wish me to read and consider or not?
Judge, I haven't had the opportunity to see it, and so at this time...
It's hard to say. Well, I have not read it except for the first sentence to try to figure out who the person is.
He is present. Is my understanding. He had just come through. It's a significant other.
Well, I'm going to give this to you, and you can decide whether or not you wish to present it to the court later on in this proceeding before I impose sentence. How's that?
Thank you, Your Honor.
And you can show it to Mr. Burris as well.
Your Honor, would you like counsel, Ms. Schuster, to have a seat while, assuming the prosecutor has individuals that may want to bring forward?
There are individuals that are going to wish to speak and address the court at the appropriate time.
And is this Ms. Schuster's family that's seated right behind her chair?
No, Your Honor. Her family's over here.
Well, why don't we just let Ms. Schuster have a seat right over here in front of the jury box, if you don't mind?
Very well.
All right, why don't you have a seat right there, Ms. Schuster? Mr. Burris, on behalf of the state of Ohio, is there anything that you wish to present at this time?
I do want to point out for the court, there are a couple of members of the Westchester Township Police Department which are present before the court. I just wanted the court to be aware that they are here. I do not wish that, I don't believe that either one wishes to address the court or say anything to the court. There are a couple family members of the victims that wish to speak. I believe Ms. Cole may have them lined up in the order they wish to address the court. So I believe Ms. Laura Dunham, who is the sister of Joseph Oliphant, first wishes to address the court.
Very well.
Okay, all right.
Start with your name, please.
Laura Dunham. My brother is Joe Oliphant. He very much wanted to be here today, but is still recovering from his injuries. He's only been home for 3 weeks now to live. He went home 1 year and 1 week after the incident. We weren't allowed to tell his injuries during the trial, and I think it's pretty important that Ms. Schuster know what he's dealing with. He has a traumatic brain injury, which required removal of a piece of his skull. He had a double compound fracture of the right leg, which required a rod being put in right above his knee that goes to his ankle, and he has some screws and I think a plate. Because of that, he's now getting calcium buildup around his knee, and this is something that a brain injury does. The brain wants to heal and get rid of that foreign object, so it's building calcium. They cannot do surgery to remove it, so more than likely he will lose the use of his leg someday. He has double vision in his right eye, and everything they have tried won't repair it. He can't have surgery. He has a broken bone in his right ear. He had a fractured pelvis. After they put his skull back on, he had to have a shunt installed, which is where they drill a hole into your head, and there's a tube that runs down his neck into his stomach, and he will have that for the rest of his life to keep fluid off of the brain. He still has no control over his bladder. He was unconscious for 11 days in an injury-induced coma. He had a trach and feeding tube for 5 months. And in June of 2015, he was transferred from Jewish Hospital to the Heart and Lung Center because his chest and legs were full of clots. And they did not think he was supposed to survive that, and he did. But I have something I want to read. Gratefully, I've never done anything like this before, so I just...
Take your time. We have all afternoon.
Well, good. Because literally I could probably keep you here for a few days. I have thought about what I would like to say over and over in my mind. I have written and rewritten what I need to say 100 times. If I speak about all the heartache and pain that Michele Schuster has caused our family, we would be here for hours. I was speaking with one of my closest friends about it, and she suggested I ask Michele what she has done in 13 months since causing all of this heartache to change herself. I think a more appropriate question would be, what would she change about April 22nd, 2015? She could give Dylan his mom back. She could take the hurt of missing someone every day away from those who loved Amber so much. She could give a family the Shannon they had before she was consumed by all of this grief. She could give Joe the life he enjoyed with his family. She could give him back hunting, fishing, woodworking, farming, riding his motorcycle, driving his truck, the ability to work the job he loved, and not be in excruciating pain every minute of every day, still trying to understand what has happened here. She could reverse the damage done to my husband's heart because of the stress of all of this. He ended up in the hospital last June. She could give us the getaway we had planned with Joe and Anita last June, give us events, celebrations, holidays, and time missed with family while sitting in hospitals, undo sleepless nights, and wipe away every tear shed because of her poor judgment. Michele's list of victims goes far beyond the people on the scene April 22nd, 2015. The list is very long. Joe was the best brother a girl could ask for. You have changed him. You have taken his ability to hop in his truck and come to Indiana for a visit whenever he wants. But you'll never change my love for him. Thank God you didn't take the part of his mind that remembers who we are. He was so proud to be a lineman, Michele. My father was a lineman, and he was killed in a storm. I know how you feel to lose a father. He was killed working in a storm, and it meant so much to Joe to follow in his footsteps. And I want to tell you how much it meant to him. Shortly after the accident, I was in his room with him. Joe had very long hair. I said, "You're going to be so angry. They had to cut your long hair and shave your head." I held his hand and I said, "You look so handsome. You look like our dad. He would have been so proud of you." A tear rolled down his cheek. A tear coming out of a man lying there unconscious with a broken body and his skull removed. That's what our father, and that's what his job as a lineman meant to him. And you've ruined that.
Thank you. Is Mrs. Littleton here?
No, Your Honor, I believe that she is, she's with her husband who's getting ready to, I forgot what the procedure was.
Brain scan tomorrow.
So she is not able to be present before the court. I do believe,
I got a victim impact statement from her as well as Joe Oliphant.
I would certainly ask the court to take that into consideration when passing sentence.
She indicated, in addition to what Laura Dunham indicated, that Mr. Oliphant, in some ways, is left with a mind that's somewhat, there you are, almost childlike. I mean, he's had injuries to his brain that's affected his personality.
Yes, his long-term memory is intact. He knows who we are. He has no short-term memory. So if I go spend 8 hours with him today, he may or may not remember that tomorrow. I was talking to his wife yesterday, and since he's been home, he has zero motivation. He lives on a huge piece of land. He has hunting, fishing. He has his own wood shop. He has a hunting room full of his prized possessions, which, since he's been home for 3 weeks, he hasn't even asked to go in. He doesn't ask to drive, and he loved to drive. So, I mean, it's just, I just can't express. He's living, but he's not. And the brain scan he's having tomorrow is expected to be 5 hours, and he just couldn't travel here today and then there tomorrow. And tomorrow's test is going to show them whether they feel that his brain is going to heal anymore or whether it has plateaued.
All right, thank you. This is Ms. Rooks' family.
Yes, Your Honor. I do believe Amber's mother, Shannon, does wish to address the court. I'm being told that they're requesting that Dylan, Amber's son, also be allowed to address the court. I would ask a request that Dylan not be filmed, his face not be put on TV, if he is allowed to address the court. But we'll start with Shannon.
You don't have any objection, do you? I don't think you would.
No, Your Honor.
All right, well, to the members of our news media, the child is not to be filmed or audio taped. Is that understood? Very well, go order.
Thank you,
All
Your
right.
Honor. Would you like to address first Shannon or Dylan?
I'm Shannon Deas. I am Amber Rooks' mother, Dylan's grandmother. She was 24 years old. I have pictures here of her. My last actual conversation with Amber, where she responded, was around 1:30 the day of the accident. She was calling because she just started this job at AWP. She was so full of life. All she wanted to do was provide for Dylan because she was a single mom. You know, Dad was never around, so it was her and Dylan against the world. She called to tell me she bought Kings Island passes and asked me, you know, could she print them out and so forth at home. That was at 1:30. At 10 till 4, I received a phone call from AWP telling me there was an accident. Of course, What'd she do? Break a leg, arm? And it would not tell me at all. I proceeded like a crazy person to drive to UC Hospital, be daycare and everything else by I don't even know how long. When I got to see my daughter, who I've never spoken to since, or she's never spoken to me, I should say. My beautiful young daughter had tubes and wires coming from her that I've only imagined saw on TV. I've never, ever. This is what I saw of her. I've never seen anything like it. She was in an induced coma. And during this whole time, we had every hope that she was going to be okay. And she kept having seizures behind seizures. Dylan never saw his mom after that morning. That Wednesday morning, she left him a note and told him she'd see him that night. She loved him, and I never let him go to the hospital. I was advised not to because of the graphicness. Amber had a full frontal craniotomy, which they say they do maybe once a year because it's so rare to relieve the pressure on her brain. Amber was completely deaf in her right ear upon impact. She was blind in her right eye. If she would have survived, my daughter would have been paraplegic, blind, and at least deaf in her right ear. On Friday night, by grace of God, my daughter gave birth to a beautiful little girl around 11 o'clock at night. At the same time, I'm running between floors because my other daughter is dying. I get downstairs and they allow us to stay with her. And throughout the night, she kept having seizures over and over because her brain was not responding the way they wanted. We sat all day Saturday. By late Saturday night around 9:30, 10 o'clock, the doctors came out and told me my daughter was legally brain dead. 24 years old, legally brain dead for something she had no control over. All she did was go to work. That's all she did. Along with Joe, Blake, Billy, and Tiffany. That's all they did. They went to work. They were supporting their families. They were doing what a person's supposed to do. She passed away, but unfortunately they kept her on life support for a few more days because she gave life to at least 6 others. My daughter was an organ donor. She gave life to at least 6 others. A young girl of 25 years old received her heart, and I really don't know where everything else went. Upon all this, you say you want mercy, you want us compassion. Where's my compassion? You want a shorter sentence? I would love for Amber to get a shorter sentence in that grade. I will never see her, speak to her, talk to her. Dylan, he plays football. You think she sees him when he makes that touchdown? No. When she plays baseball? No. I have a little boy who now has been diagnosed with PTSD, depression. He goes to school, and it's a challenge for him to go to school on a daily basis. He has mental health workers at school. He sees a mental health worker on a monthly basis because he doesn't process it. He doesn't understand.
You're talking about Dylan?
Yes, sir. He's 9 years old. His mom will never be at his graduation, his wedding, his college, nothing. Dylan will, and he doesn't have a father. So, you say you lost your father, well, he never had one. His mother was his world, his solid world. He is now living with my husband and my family, and we will take care of him no matter what. But I know what my pain is. I couldn't imagine what he's going through at 9 years old, never being able to have that again. He will not go to her gravesite. He will go to her memorial site that keeps getting vandalized by whom I have no clue. So that's all he has. He doesn't have family coming to see him. Regardless of how much time she gets, her family can still see her, talk to her, write to her. She still gets the holidays. She still gets everything that anyone would get. We don't get that. We get to put balloons on her grave. Her birthday is past, his birthday, everything. That's all we get. We don't get anything else. And this little guy, that's all he wanted was his mom back. He asks me why. I can't tell him why. I can't explain someone else's actions. I can't. He leaves for school in the morning, and his last question to me is, Nana, do you promise to be there when I get home? Yes, I promise to be there. He is completely, his world is shattered. You know? So as far as mercy and compassion, where's ours? And my feeling is, regardless of what's going on, you know, I was not there that day. Regardless if she says she was drugged or she took it upon herself, she had the mental status, because where Amber was hit and all of them were hit was down the street. She knew at that point in time she was unable to drive, regardless of whatever. She was in a parking lot full of people. She could have hollered for help. She had a phone. She could have called 911. She could have done anything else. But instead, she got into a vehicle and decided, who cares? What happens to anybody else? And that's exactly what happened. And she has never showed any remorse. And as far as family or anything, she had someone approached us out there, and they all took care of it. But there's never been any remorse from what I've ever seen. No sorry, no nothing to the media, to anyone. And Judge, I mean, as far as Phil goes, I just would like for her to serve everything she needs for him too, because I mean, his life, he's serving a lifelong sentence. There's nothing anybody can do to take that from him. Would you like to say something?
Dylan,
Dylan, the judge is speaking to you, honey.
how are you today?
Good.
Anything you want to tell me?
All
All right. You know, I didn't know your mother, but I am certain that she wants you to have a good childhood, to be happy, to grow up, to be a good, strong young man, right? Huh? Do well in school, mind your grandparents, right? So I think that's how you can honor your mother's memory. You don't, you're hurting, the people around you are hurting, but be inspired by your mother's life, all right? And don't let what has happened to your mom and this event and how it's affected your family limit you. You know what I'm saying?
He missed a field
So
trip.
I'd encourage everyone around him to not talk in his presence about how things are going to be limited,
And
but
we
how
know.
they can be, how this should inspire. So I wish you the very best, young man. You're a fine-looking young man, and I know your mom will be proud of you. Anything else you want to tell me?
You know, he missed a field trip today. This is something he wanted to do, but as far as talking about,
And don't, you're hurting, the people around you are hurting, but be inspired by your mother's life, all right? And don't let what has happened to your mom and this event and how it's affected your family limit you. You know what I'm saying?
he missed a
And
field
so
trip.
I'd encourage everyone around him to not talk in his presence about how things are going to be limited,
And
but
we
how they can be, how this should inspire them. So I wish you the very best, young man. You're a fine-looking young man, and I know your mom will be proud of you. Anything else you want to tell me?
You know, he missed a field trip today. This is something he wanted to do, but as far as talking about him, I have other several children here. her sibling, and we love Amy. We all rally around him, but we don't talk about it. He's never seen a media. He never knew what she looked like until today, because we hide it from him.
Well,
Not hide it, but just kind of keep everything.
well, I'm glad that you're doing it in a positive fashion, and I cannot imagine the hurt that all of you are going through. And so I admire you.
Thank you.
Do any of the other victims or any of the other victims present or wish to speak?
I don't believe that there are no other victims. Ms. McCants is not present. Mr. Billy Moore is not present. It's my understanding that nobody else from any of the families wish to address the court. I know that Tiffany McCants gave this court a victim impact statement. I would ask the court to take that into consideration. I have not seen anything from Billy Moore. I have not seen a victim impact statement from Billy Moore. I don't know if there's anything in the PSI. Mr. Blake Patton, the linesman that was
We do have a victim impact statement from he was the fellow that was in the bucket.
That's correct, Your Honor.
Truck was struck.
That's correct, Your Honor. He did indicate to me that he wished to be here. However, he took a new job, and with the probationary periods and getting time off from work, he just was not able to be here to address the court. But he wanted to thank the court for presiding over this case and ask the court to pass the appropriate sentence upon considering all the factors. I know there are restitution issues if the court wishes to address at the appropriate time. Just from the state of Ohio's standpoint, the court did sit through the trial in this case. The court did hear all the evidence, all the testimony. The court can look at the witnesses and judge credibility and judge different stories that happen and what is believable and not believable. Unfortunately, we are here in the state of Ohio's opinion because of Michele Schuster's actions. Whatever it is that happened, she made the decision to get her keys out of her purse, get into her car, put the keys in the ignition. The court heard my arguments as to what it is I gave in closing. Left the parking lot and drove down the street in a lane of travel before this incident happened. So I find it somewhat incredible that she was so out of it and didn't know anything that she was doing, that she was able to get from the parking lot down the road to where this incident happened. So that's all I have, Your Honor. I ask the court to take into consideration the PSI, the victim impact statements, the words that were said to you here, the statutory factors, and pass the appropriate sentence. Thank you.
Mr. Hawkins, you've had the opportunity to review the PSI and the various victim impact statements, correct?
Yes, Your Honor, I have.
And I know there's the additional letter of the court gave Mr. Hawkins. Are you going to ask him to consider it?
May I approach, Judge?
Would you like me to consider the information contained in this letter?
If the court would take a moment and just read through it briefly, I appreciate it.
Mr. Hawkins did show the letter to me. The letter is what it is, Your Honor, so I have no objection to the court reviewing it, determining what the appropriate sentence is.
court has reviewed this letter from Mr. Michael Ahleers, A-H-L-E-R-S. I'm going to, after this sentencing is over, I'm going to ask that Mr. Well, how can we preserve this other than marking it as an exhibit for review?
Court, if you'd like me to mark it as
Objection
a...
to all the victim impact statements as well as the letter from Mr. Ahleers be preserved as an exhibit collectively, Roman numeral 1, for purposes of sentencing.
No objection on behalf of the defense.
No objection on behalf of the state of Ohio.
Very well. Well, then, Mr. Laguna, after the sentencing is over, I'll give that to you and it can be preserved. Now, is there anything else that you'd like to present on behalf of the defendant prior to sentencing?
No, Your Honor.
Is there any legal reason why the court may not proceed with sentencing?
No, Your Honor.
The court has considered the purposes and principles of sentencing related to recidivism and the seriousness factors. Of course, the court heard all the testimony and the evidence during the course of the trial. We'll consider the information in the victim impact statements, the letter I mentioned previously, the pre-sentence investigation report. I've been a judge now for a number of years. And this has been one of the most difficult sentencing hearings that I can recall sitting through. The impact, Ms. Schuster, that you've had on so many people, so many families, in your own family, in your future, just horribly sad. And so needless. And you come to the court, you come to this case with no criminal record whatsoever. Seldom that I see someone facing such legal problems and have no prior record. There's no doubt in my mind that you would, if you could, change things and change what happened and change what you did that day and the events leading up to it. But you can't. And I looked at a map, familiar with that road, and I imagined during that time of day that your car, even if you weren't conscious, or could have veered off into, it's an unpopulated area, it's a wide road, for your car to strike exactly where it struck. There could not have been worse luck than what we have in this case. Worse or more tragic results. So, Ms. Rooks suffered and died. Mr. Oliphant, it sounds like he may and has been just a shell of his former self. Ms. McCants, I saw her walk in here to testify significant injuries. So, all around, this is a terribly, terribly tragic case. There are no easy answers. But without question, the impact on the victims and their families and the loved ones is significant. Ms. Schuster, you're convicted in count 1 of aggravated vehicular homicide. It's a felony of the 2nd degree. In my mind, whatever the worst form of the offense is, you've committed that. And that goes with respect to counts 1, 3, 5. And the court will sentence you to 8 years in the Ohio Department of Rehabilitation and Corrections. It will be a mandatory sentence by law. The court will impose a lifetime driver's license suspension. You were also convicted of count 3, aggravated vehicular assault. This, of course, involved the injuries to Mr. Oliphant. The court will sentence you to 60 months in the Ohio Department of Rehabilitation and Corrections. It is also a mandatory sentence. That sentence will be served consecutive to the sentence imposed in count 1. The court will impose, relative to count 3, a driver's license suspension, 10 years, and of course that'll run concurrent with the driver's license suspension imposed in count 1. The driver's license suspensions imposed in these cases will all begin on April 22nd, 2015. In count 5, and you're convicted of aggravated vehicular assault. This involved the injuries to Tiffany McCants. The court will impose 36 months in the Ohio Department of Rehabilitation and Corrections. It's a mandatory sentence that will run consecutive to the sentences imposed in counts 1 and 3. Will impose a 10-year driver's license suspension concurrent to the suspensions imposed in counts 1 and 3. With respect to your conviction in count 7, this involved the injuries to Billy Moore. The court will impose a mandatory sentence of 36 months. That sentence will run concurrent to the sentence imposed in count 5. That also is a mandatory sentence. The court will also impose a driver's license suspension of 10 years. That will run concurrent with the other driver's license suspensions. count 9, you were convicted of operating a motor vehicle under the influence. It's a misdemeanor of the first degree. Court will impose a 6-month driver's license, 6-month jail sentence, 3 days of which is mandatory. That sentence will run concurrent with counts 1, 3, 5, 7. We'll impose a driver's license suspension of 3 years concurrent with the other driver's license suspensions. Court will also impose a fine of $375. And you're also ordered to pay the court costs associated with this case. To receive credit for time served in the amount of 52 days. Upon your release from prison, you will be subjected to a mandatory 3-year period of post-release control. If you violate the post-release control sanctions, the parole authority can return you to prison and require that you serve more time in prison, up to 1/2 of your original sentence, on 1 or more post-release control violations. The court has considered your financial resources, your ability to pay financial sanctions both now and in the future. You have the right to appeal your conviction, the right to appeal the sentences when imposed. In order to preserve your appellate rights, you must file a notice of appeal in 30 days. If you are indigent, you have the right to have an attorney appointed to represent you. Have the appeal filed with payment of court costs, and have any documents necessary for your appeal provided to you without cost. Now, the court would like to make clear that the presumption that exists in the law with respect to current sentences has been rebutted.
Thank you.
Been rebutted in this case. The court will find that the imposition of consecutive sentences is necessary to adequately protect the public and to punish you, and are not disproportionate. We will find consecutive terms are necessary because the harm is so great or unusual that a single term does not adequately reflect the seriousness of your conduct. Counsel has requested an appellate bond. The court's not inclined to will deny the request for an appellate bond. If you would like to file a formal motion and an entry so you can make a record for the Court of Appeals, feel free to file that and bring that to my attention. All right. Now, Ms. Schuster, you'll be held in Butler County Jail until you can be transported to prison. Are there any questions regarding the sentence?
Counsel, has a question if I could approach. I have a question. Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Judge.
Your Honor, on behalf of Ms. Schuster, we do want to note for the record for appellate purposes that she's objecting with regard to the maximum sentence in count 1, count 3, as well as the consecutive sentences.
Fair enough. Those issues are preserved for appellate review. There was, in the victim impact statements, there was some discussion of restitution. What's clear is Ms. Schuster, from everything that this court could gather, on the day in question, did not have any significant assets or sources of income. And she will be behind bars for the next 15, 16 years. And what's also clear is that there's probably going to be civil suits. There are going to be complicated civil suits. And in order to, the court's not inclined to address the issue of restitution. I'm not going to order restitution. I think that it'd be very difficult to do that with any degree of precision based upon the information that's before me. And I think there's going to be likely, given in my experience, probably many complicated, possibly conflicting civil claims being made in this case. So ultimately, the court is going to leave it up to the civil courts and the civil lawyers to sort out the money. We're not, given the complexity of this case, given the complexity of the various actors, it would be very difficult to do that, and I'm not inclined to do that. And will not do that. Any questions on the issue? Any questions on the issue of restitution?
No, Your Honor.
All right. Well, to the victims and their families, thank you for being here. Thank you for, despite the grief and the sorrow that you're facing, to conduct yourself in a manner that's fitting a court of law, and the court appreciates that. And wishes each and every one of you and the victims themselves the very best, trying to patch together the wreckage of their lives. Ms. Schuster, that goes for you as well. Serve your time and recover and make the best of what you have left in this life. The court wishes you the very best. All right. I also want to thank counsel. Very difficult for both the prosecutor, Mr. Burris, and Mr. Hawkins, the defense attorney. And each and every day that I see you in this courtroom, you display the utmost professionalism and the strongest advocacy that is available for each of your clients, the state of Ohio and the defendant. And that's how this system is supposed to work. In my mind, does work. You do your best to defend people like Ms. Schuster, and the state does its best to represent the interest of our community. So, I wanted to take this opportunity to publicly thank you. All right, if there are no further questions, the defendant will be removed. Court will stand in recess.
Please rise. Court's in recess. Dismissed, ladies and gentlemen.